I'm Brandon with Gana Trucking and Excavating. We're doing another training video today, and today we're going to talk about hazard assessment at job sites. This is something that we have to do every single day, no matter what we're doing. This is something that every employee, no matter what activity you're going to be performing, has to do every single day. Truck drivers need to do it, mechanics need to do it, heavy equipment operators need to do it. Everybody needs to do it. It's just markedly different depending on what you're going to be doing that day and what function you're going to be performing, okay? The first thing you always want to do is usually the simplest thing. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today is indefinable. I can stand here for 6 or 7 hours and go over any different number of scenarios, but there is no way any manual or talk could ever cover all the things that could eventually happen out in the field. So there's going to be a lot of generalities. There's a lot of undefinable things you got to be looking for. So the first thing you do at a job site every single day, no exceptions to this, is come up with the plan. And this is very basic stuff. The who, what, the why, the where, and the when. Okay? What are we doing today? That's the what. What's the function we're going to be doing? So if you're a heavy equipment operator, we might be preparing to grade an area. If you're a side dump driver, we're going to be coming into this job site, dumping loads of gravel, riprap, whatever it may be, and then exiting over here. If you're a mechanic coming onto a job site, you're going to be working on a scraper. So what all does that entail by working on that specific piece of equipment? Okay. The who is doing what? If you have multiple operators or multiple truck drivers at a job site, you need to understand which operator is going to be operating which piece of equipment and what duty they're going to be performing. Is somebody going to be digging a small trench over here while we're doing grading over here? Things like that. Have a plan for who is going to be doing what in what location. Which leads us to the next one. Where is the activity going to be happening at? At some of these bigger job sites, you'll have multiple subcontractors doing various things. One important thing to pay attention to is the who, what, the why, the where, when. Everything that goes into a hazard assessment isn't just pertaining to Gana Trucking and Excavating employees. You need to take into account other contractors who might be sharing a job site with you, other truck drivers who might be coming and going, just pedestrians who might be in the area. You have to take into account all that. It's a lot to do, obviously, but it's very important. The next thing within that planning is when. When are things going to happen? Do we know that another contractor is coming here in a few hours? If you're a heavy equipment operator, do you know when the trucks are going to be arriving at your job site? Have a plan in place to know all of that as best as you possibly can. And finish off that portion of what we're talking about, one of the most overlooked things is very important to have the plan, equally important to share the plan. Equally important is to communicate that plan. If there are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, no matter how many number of employees are working on the job, it doesn't do you any good if only one person knows the plan. So it's very important that the plan is communicated to everybody working there and who's going to be coming there. We're going to go over a couple points of emphasis now. Like I said earlier, there's no way we could do everything all-encompassing that's going to cover every eventuality we'll run into out there. A hazard assessment isn't just limited to these, but it's certainly going to include these. First one, very important one, utilities, both underground and overhead. This is something we run into daily. When you go to any job site, if you're a heavy equipment operator and we're going to dig in the dirt, even if it's 1 inch, we have to make sure that a one call is done. It is always the contractor's responsibility to make sure one call has been done. If Gana Trucking and Excavating equipment or employees are going to be digging in the ground, then Gana Trucking and Excavating has to be the one to do a one call. Now, as an operator out in the field, that is not your responsibility, okay? That is the project manager's responsibility. We do very, very well with it. We have hundreds of one calls active at any given time, okay? But if you get out to a job site and it's clear that a one call has not been done or is not up to date, call it in. Now, equally as important, if you go out to a job site and it's not clear and you just don't know if a one call has been done, if you're at a 21-acre open lot in the middle of Lincoln and there are no flags out there, well, if you're in Lincoln, there's probably something buried under the ground. So it's worth a call into the project manager to make certain that a one call has been done. It takes all of 30 seconds for a project manager in the office to confirm yes or no. Under no circumstances do we ever dig before a one call has been done. Another important part with utilities are overhead utilities, okay? Those are easy to overlook in our industry, but equally as important. We've never had a significant issue with them, but that's because we talk about them quite a bit. If you're operating heavy equipment, whether it be a hoe or a load or something, you got to pay attention to what's above you when you lift the bucket or drive under certain areas. Where we do run in this from time to time is straight truck drivers. After they've dumped their load, they raise the box and they start pulling forward. They don't look up and they'll make contact with overhead power lines. It's also important, if you bring down a power line on top of a truck or your equipment and it's electricity, don't get out of the vehicle. If you've ever made underground or overhead impact with electrical lines, stay in the vehicle if possible. If it's gas underground that you've made contact with, shut the engine down and just walk away and call it in right away so that we can get it resolved. Another thing we have to think about on our job sites with the type of work we do is the flow of traffic. And this can mean a lot of different things. At its simplest form, it means what are our trucks or our equipment going to do on a job site. The most common type of accident within the truck industry are slow speed backing collisions. So the best way to avoid a backing collision is don't back up, okay? If we can find a way for the trucks to come full circle while they're dumping their loads, that's the ideal situation. Obviously that doesn't always happen, and we do have to back up from time to time. We always have to make certain we do so in a safe manner. Now, outside of the job site, there's other things we have to pay attention to. Pedestrian traffic. We work in a lot of high volume areas. University of Nebraska is a great example of that, where people are consistently walking around. And they don't always see and or pay attention to the construction fencing or the warning signs. You have to be aware that people can walk in, okay? If the site's not been adequately secured. That's another thing you have to be aware of. Another thing that we have to look out for in our industry, environmental conditions that are always changing. Moisture in soils, wind, changing weather conditions. Might have been a perfectly good job site one day, but after a rain shower the next day, you have to evaluate that to make certain, will the soil actually dig, or are we going to get trucks stuck whenever they come in, okay? Another thing, something we do a really good job with here, but it's always good to have a reminder, equipment readiness. Now this certainly begins with our Zonar inspections on our equipment and all of our trucks every day. Very important to inspect those equipment and trucks before we use them every single day to make sure that the equipment is safe to run and that it will run. Another thing we have to take into account, do we have the right equipment for the right job? That's kind of an evaluation that an experienced operator can make. Maybe even though the schedule called for side dumps just won't fit. They're too big and too long to fit in this site, and we have to audible the straight trucks. Or maybe we're trying to use a skid loader when we would be better served to use a track loader in this particular situation. There's any number of scenarios that can play out like that. So just be certain that we have the right equipment for the right job. And if you're not certain, you have a thought, suggestion, or comment, just call into the project manager and we can get that addressed for you. Another thing that we run into on a daily basis that we have to be aware of is the proper PPE, personal protective equipment, okay? That's something that there's a lot of things going on there you have to take into account. If there's a likelihood or a reasonable expectation of an overhead hazard, you gotta have hard hats. Every employee is issued a hard hat. If you lose yours or yours becomes defective, just call it in and we can get you one in a moment's notice. Same with the high-vis safety vest. Obviously, everybody's issued one of those whenever they start. We can get you a replacement if yours is old, worn out, or you've lost it. You're good. You're good, Troy. That's not a problem. Very important to wear those when there is a lot of activity going on. So pretty much any job site, you need to have that on, just with the amount of activity that we do and the type of work we do. What?
Not to mention debris falling.
Yeah, that goes into the overhead hazards. Yep. As Troy just pointed out from across the room, another thing to look out for, not just overhead hazards, but debris falling, whether it's from loading trucks with rubble, concrete, things like that. That's another good time to evaluate when the hard hat is necessary, obviously. Flying debris, if it's simple as dusty and stuff out there like that, we have safety glasses for every single employee as well. Very important to have those. Hearing protection too. If you're in a place with a lot of loud machinery running for extended periods of time, we have earplugs for every single employee, and everybody's already been issued one of those as well. Okay? Very important too, those are when, by your own evaluation, you need to use it. Most job sites we go to, it's required anyway. It certainly is at our job sites, it's always required when you're out of your equipment to have high vis on and your hard hat on. So more often than not, the job rules are going to supersede any evaluation we're going to do anyway. A few more things here, just to look for specific hazards, unique to your own job. Again, and I know I've said this multiple times, this is never going to be an all-encompassing list, okay? There's too many things happening, too many eventualities that can happen. So what we need to do is just go to points of emphasis so we get a general idea of what we need to keep an eye out for, okay? You gotta pay attention to chemical hazards. If something's leaking, trip and falls, that could be two things. If you're working from an elevated platform above 4 feet, you need to be secured somehow, okay? When you hear fall securement, your mind immediately goes to being tied off on something. That is a type of fall securement. 99% of the time, our fall securement is just working behind a rail if you're near a ledge or anything like that. Again, be aware of traffic conditions of vehicles or heavy equipment, the paths you're taking, how much they're coming and going. Utilities, both underground and overhead. Overhead hazards, that's why we have the hard hats, but that's not limited to just the hard hat idea. That's also with overhead power lines, low-hanging objects, things like that. Fire hazards, I believe every truck and nearly every piece of equipment has a fire extinguisher in it. Make sure that's part of your equipment inspection, make sure that is charged and ready for use. And on the final thing I'll say is that every single employee in this company has the authority to stop work. If they see something that is not safe or just that they're uncertain about, they can stop, call it in so that we can address their concerns or change what we're doing. We're not out, project managers are not out at every single job at every single moment. So the situations can change. And something that was very simple, efficient, and safe 4 or 5 hours ago, the situation has changed and it's no longer safe. We were counting on the employees in the field to let us know the situation has changed and we have to reevaluate and come up with a new plan. We've done very well at doing that in the past and we'll continue to do well. But we need to know there is a problem. So I've told a lot of people, every employee has the authority to stop work and every employee has the duty to ask questions if there are questions. So again, that was just a list of very high level bullet points that we need to think about before we start any job every single day, to give everything a 360 view, take into account the hazards, the potential for hazards, come up with corrective ways to minimize those hazards and move forward from there. Again, there's so many things that could possibly happen, so many different scenarios that could play out. The most important thing I want you to take away from this is if you have a question or a concern, share it. Share it with the project manager who knows the site and who knows the general contractor in those instances. We can always come up with a plan. It'd be so much better to delay the job for 10 or 15 minutes while we come up with a plan than for something tragic to happen. So feel free to ask questions and we expect you to ask questions.